right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it's week number 10. It was a phenomenal week. There were upsets all over the board. Many of those top teams being upset, some great ones, and thank good golly, Miss Molly, that Clemson, you went to South Bend, Indiana, and everything I wished for and hoped for happened and was true. Thank you, Notre Dame. Thank you, Touchdown Jesus. But the man I am most thankful for, my co-host, Fresh. How you doing?
Haps, doing pretty good. Really exciting weekend across the board. A lot of great games. A lot of points scored. A fun time, real fun time. We're going to definitely see a major shakeup in the playoff rankings this week, and only make it crazier and tighter going forward.
All right, so let's jump in this week for winners and losers from week number 10 here. So there's a lot to talk about in this weekend. A lot of things going down. Fresh, where are you going first?
I want to go take a look at that SMU Houston game. I mean, that was just an absolute barn burner. You set a record for points, I think 140. Mordecai throws 9 touchdowns and runs for 10 total. Just going back and forth, back and forth. They had 56 points at halftime. At first, you kind of joking, you thought it was a basketball score, and you kept waiting for the free throws to come down at the end, to even up the ball game. But that was just that's what college football shootouts and you kind of get really excited for. And it's even more impressive that game didn't even go to overtime. It was straight regulation, just points galore everywhere. Absolutely amazing. And SMU find a way to get the win there and beating Houston Cougars. But it's also we had so much high hopes for Houston, and that team is completely just fallen off. But a great game all around, great show of excitement and offense across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I was catching the highlights on that one. I didn't get to see a whole lot of that. Flipped over, I saw the score, and I was like, anyone in Vegas is just going nuts right now if they've taken the over. Because the over, I think, it crossed like with about 2 or 3 minutes left in the first half.
Oh yeah, that definitely hit early. And you set a record for points scored in regulation, and you set a record for combined touchdowns. That's just insane.
Yeah. All right, Fresh. My first winner is a game I texted you about real early on in the night here. Liberty going into Arkansas and upsetting the Razorbacks. We started having a conversation a little bit later about how which team out of the group of 5 is going to be the team to get the New Year's Day 6 bid that's out of the non-power 5 teams. Liberty is making a hard case to be recognized here. Jonathan Bennett, 3 touchdowns in that game. And Liberty, for most of that game, was winning by 2.5 scores. 2.5 touchdowns, I should say. But I know Arkansas came back. Great defensive stand at the end of the game to prevent the Razorbacks from tying that game. But really impressive day by Liberty Flames. They did a great job containing KJ Jefferson. He threw 2 interceptions in the game. But most importantly, he was 16 carries on only 36 yards. I'm Hugh Freeze and the Liberty Flames, man. Enjoy having Hugh Freeze this year because he's going to be on a lot of people's short list going into next season.
Yeah, I mean, that was at first, you kind of start the season, you're like, oh, Liberty, they don't have Malik Willis like they had last year. They're a Q program, they're resurgent, they're growing, but they aren't the same team as they were last year. And we've all been proven wrong on that. This is a program built top to bottom and to be successful, over multiple years. And I think that's what Hugh Freeze is, really supplanted that there. Where they go into Arkansas, last year they went to Ole Miss. That didn't turn out so well with Malik. This year going to Arkansas and, just bellying up first off on a program that was trying to, find itself and sort of resurge and get themselves back in an organization. They did not give Arkansas a single breath of fresh air. They went after them from the very beginning and got a huge win. And that's just going to take them, they weren't in the college playoff top 25 after week 1. They were that one team who was in the AP top 25, but they weren't ranked in the college football playoff. That will obviously change. But now you have the race for that New Year's 6. Is it Tulane? Is it UCF? Is it Liberty? Which of those 3 is going to survive and be the highest ranked? Come end of Thanksgiving, December 4th. That's that Sunday. It'll be interesting to follow up and see if they can continue to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I can't wait to see because they only have a 1-point loss to Wake Forest early on in the year, so they could have very well have been undefeated this season. All right, Fresh, who you got next?
I don't know if this is going to be a loser or a winner, but those two teams are playing this football game. But I'm going to give Florida State a lot of credit. Um, Mike Norvell is, he had the big win, opening week for LSU, kind of treaded water, had some games up, some games down. But in a rivalry game in the state of Florida versus Miami, and that's Florida State Miami, pretty funny during our preview. We wouldn't even talk about it because it's so irrelevant, on the national landscape. Unfortunately, like it used to be, where it's dominant. He went down and took the Noles down there to Miami Gardens, and they didn't just beat Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes. They might have stole their soul. It was 45-3. Uh, it was just absolute thorough beatdown from start to finish. Florida State supplanting their dominance. Um, and it sets up a Florida State game in Tallahassee in a couple of weeks where Florida's actually, they've been up and down, but they played decent versus A&M. Granted, A&M's not very good, but that could be for a pretty exciting game. Who's actually going to have control of the state of Florida and want to actually compete with UCF for that crown? But this is a big step in the right direction for Norvell this year, really putting his identity on that program and getting a big rivalry win in the state. It he was coming on hot ice from the Deion Sanders stuff out there. It was I think better for him in the program to go out there and take care of business because they had lost or played bad. You could even see, they've played better, but the Deion rumors to Florida State, if there's any connection there, might have continued to heat up as that whole movement in the coaching search moves. But Florida State, great job. Travis is the quarterback for that squad, and they are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shocked at that. And I think that a lot of people, especially if you're Oregon and you're now sitting there what you got going on with Dan Lanning and going, hey, look at what Cristobal is doing. Maybe we were better off with him leaving us high and dry, and we were able to get Lanning out here. So could be a good move for the Ducks in long term on this one. All right, Fresh. My next winner, and you know what, I gotta go to it right away on it. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Thank you. I put this out there very early on. I was like so excited that this was happening. They're up 21-0. I said, for all things the love of Rudy, Notre Dame, please hold on to this. And they did. They wound up winning this game huge and in dominating fashion. Clemson looked absolutely clueless up there in South Bend, Indiana, and just were awful. And then the whole thing of switching the quarterbacks in and out, I would definitely put Clemson in my loser category as well. But amazing game out of Benjamin Morrison too. I'm really impressed by him. The kid just was absolutely on fire last night, and I was really impressed with watching him play. Returning the 96-yard touchdown was really great for them. And it looks like Marcus Freeman's kind of pulled the nose up out of this Notre Dame season that started off so poorly. And it could have been a lost season for Notre Dame, but man, great job out of the Irish and putting the boots to Clemson.
I mean, Notre Dame has put a stamp in the identity of who he wants that be and how he wants that program to run. It took a while for them to get their footing, but they have played with the way they played Syracuse and the way they played versus Clemson. The way they beat UNC. They have. I mean, they might as well just go and join the ACC and just win the crown. Like be like 2020, just full go in because they would be dominating right now. But you kind of hope where you've made this huge run, the way you own that football game, do they fall back to reality next week? That's kind of it's that Notre Dame team where we're like, well, you've dominated 2 weeks in a row. Do you come back and have a clunker? Because this team still has lost to Stanford and Marshall. Do you look past your next opponent in preparation for USC in a couple of weeks? It's just this is where I think it's even more of a test for Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees on that offense is we've gotten these things, we've made these accomplishments. Now we cannot revert back to where we were early in the year. We've got to keep building it on and getting successful and not, stub our toe again. That's where that could become the identity of the program. Is like you win one and you lose one. You win one, you lose one. You need to keep building in the right direction momentum wise.
All right, Fresh, who you got next?
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Georgia win over Tennessee. Team came out, played very focused football. I think they were waiting for this kind of football game. It was an exciting test. Stanford was rocking, and it just the way that Stetson Bennett was cool under pressure was pretty funny. If you ever watched with Tim Tebow when they played at LSU years ago, and all the LSU students got his number and they started texting him and calling him the entire week, and well, apparently all the Tennessee somebody at Tennessee leaked out Stetson Bennett's number, and the night before he got like 700 texts. So that's the cool thing about college football, where you have those little. You don't see that in the NFL, where you have little funny things where anything you can possibly do to getting a little advantage or mess with a player the night before a big game, but then seeing that player respond and sort of throw up the phone call after he scores a touchdown to sort of say, hey, yeah, I got your calls, I got your texts. But all in all, a great game. They aren't control the East, but this is going to be. I got a feeling Tennessee will end up making the playoff. What they have, they beat LSU, they beat Alabama. They're gonna be 11-1. It just really depends on where that national landscape goes, and if Tennessee can find that third or fourth spot in the playoff. But they are in a great spot, and I saw the AP put them at number 5. So um, it's just I think right now they're holding their breath. They're looking at the TCUs. They're looking at the Pac-12. They're looking at that Michigan Ohio State game and see how that plays out, and if they still can squeak in. But good win for Georgia. Way to they basically have locked up the East, but they can't look past Mississippi State or Kentucky and give that game away by losing a couple more down the stretch. They've got to continue to build and move toward Atlanta.
Yeah, great win out of Georgia. They played phenomenal in this game. Tennessee, I think played awful. It's the worst I've seen them play all year long. It just wasn't what I've been expecting, what I tuned in for. And the thing I'm looking at now is that the fact that the AP just drops them down to the 5, I'm disappointed. I think that they should have dropped much lower, and that's really again that's how poorly I think on them on how they performed in this game. And I look at this here too, Fresh. I'm saying, you know, right now with how the landscape is, Georgia's going to repeat as national champions again, and it's November 6th. I'm looking at it. I watched a boatload of games this weekend. And while this is only one weekend out of the year, and we can kind of go back to other weekends and say, if you look at how this team played or that team played on a different weekend, um, we're getting close to the end of the season, and we're starting to get our ideas of who's going to be very competitive in the national championship game. And I'll be honest with you, after watching everything I saw, I'd have a hard time. There's maybe one or two teams that I feel like they can step on the field with Georgia, and play at that national championship level. And I'm saying step on the field and make it a competitive ball game. I thought Tennessee was that team, and on Saturday I was proven wrong. I was proven wrong that Tennessee is not that team that is able to compete with Georgia. I I still think that they're a year away, a full year away on that absolutely where they are a true blue contender. And I think now that Alabama loss or Alabama win has taken a little more luster off because of how they got steamrolled in Death Valley the other night. Because if you watched any of that game too, yeesh, Alabama, I got some other things to say about that.
I mean, I think Tennessee's in a good spot, program wise. Josh Heupel is the right coach for that team. I think I guess the best part. They finally got it right. It's not a Jeremy Pruitt or a Derek Dooley or Butch Jones. They finally got the coach right, and that's going to give them staying power, and they're going to be in a great spot for the future.
That's why I said it's going to be a rivalry. This is why I tell you it's going to be a rivalry. It wasn't. You're right. It's not a rivalry yet. You need to win, but it's not to that point yet. All right, Fresh. My next winner, and I got to do this for a person that listens and watches us on the YouTube. I got to give credit for our one of our followers, Lions here, and his Iowa Hawkeyes scoring 24 points. Offensive explosion for Iowa here. Spencer Petras played decent and it helped. And most impressively, we saw how great Iowa's defense can be. Purdue and Aiden O'Connell has been a pretty high-powered offense, and they held O'Connell to under 50% completion rate in that game. And that's what really shocked me because O'Connell has been accurate throughout the year. I just was shocked. This Purdue team coming in was 5-3. Iowa's 4-4, and Iowa took the boots to Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, we all should have known. It's actually pretty funny if you saw the beginning where the little the Boilermaker steam engine thing just dies in the middle of the field during the run out. At that point, we all should have known that Purdue was about to just plunk it up, and Iowa was about to put on a show. It was poetic justice at that point. I'm gonna give credit to Kansas finally getting bowl eligible. I don't have the exact year in front of me, but I think them and Nebraska were the only two teams that hadn't been to a bowl in maybe since 2008 or 2007, somewhere around there. And now Nebraska stands alone. Kansas got the sixth win. Uh, that's a major testament to Lance Leipold in that program. They've had a huge start. They hadn't won a game since their game day was on campus for that TCU game, maybe 3 4 weeks ago. But to dig deep, find a way to get that sixth win. Got a couple weeks left in the season to really tack on, but great things happening there in Lawrence. And it's poetic that basketball season starts this week, so now they can merge football into basketball, and fans can actually have a year-round cheering base instead of just worrying about defending their basketball championship. They actually have a football team that's worthy of praise as well.
Yeah, it's been 13 years that they ended that streak. 13 years Kansas has been not been to a bowl game. Um, Louisiana, Monroe, Texas State, and UMass now will share the longest drought for bowl eligibility.
That's why they're all independents are bad, but yeah, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Fresh, I got one more winner for the week, and I gotta give it credit for the green wave of Tulane, man, beating the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. I know this is like, oh yeah, you go in and beat Tulsa, and yeah, Tulane is a program that has really come on this year. They have the one loss on the season, but they have just looked really, really good doing it this season. And I've just been impressed. And I know they're up ranked to the 19th ranking in college football right now, but I'm excited to see them make another little jump there. Good for that program over there because Tulane is not like a sexy program that everyone else, every college player is wanting to go to. They're kind of it's nice to see some of these smaller programs really make a name for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of want to see that, and it's a special season right there. And the last, I think the real true last player like you said we talked about earlier was Sean King and JP Lawson way back, and seeing them really get this program humming in the right direction is pretty cool.
Yeah, they had 357 yards of total offense, or I'm sorry, of rushing.
Hey, and we still have that hope for the Crimson Tide and Green Wave, the Bahamas Bowl matchup. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right, Fresh. Any more winners? Or you want to go to the loser side of things?
I got one more. We actually had a lot of winners this week, but the next one is Ohio State. And you being a Buckeye fan, I'm sure you saw that those 45, 50 minor wins, even the pregame kicks were is kind of crazy. But it shows a football team's resolve where your CJ Stroud in that passing attack is lethal. They found a ways to hunker down, move the ball, get the touchdowns on a weird, nasty road environment. Um, like you look at it, it looks like a high school stadium at Northwestern, but the defense played fantastic. They shut down, kept Northwestern off the field, didn't allow points. And that's kind of you need those gritty wins every once in a while where things just aren't going your way. You got to find ways to dig deep. And the Buckeyes they made a statement they can win ugly if they have to, and that was a big way to go on the road in a nasty environment and get it done. Keep your focus, because I think they all know that matchup versus Michigan, in a couple of weeks is the real target, but they've got to find ways to get there. And that was another way to stay undefeated and keep moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think they played that poor. I was not very high on their performance. I know the weather was absolutely awful. I know that they were missing quite a few players as well. There's a report later on that I saw that about the kids in the two deep that either did they are held out or didn't make the trip out there. So it started to kind of ease like my because I was ready to criticize Ohio State on how they played in this game, and I was like, okay, like I can understand that. I'd rather this type of game come against Northwestern and come out with a win still and still go, okay, at the end of the day, it's a win. You move on. You're still undefeated. Still go 9-0. Worry about the task at hand next week. Doesn't matter as long as you win the games. Um, but again, you're right. There was a nasty element of a game, and the fact that early going, I was watching and Ohio State trying to run the ball was just awful. And then you saw Mayan Williams finally start to break a few runs and winds up with over 100 yards rushing. So good job out of him. And again, the defense and Jim Knowles has just been absolutely phenomenal. So I guess, if you talk about my favorite Ohio State recruit coming into this 2022 year, it's got to be Jim Knowles because that defense is on point right now.
Yeah, they're in the right spots. He's making the right calls, and the guys are reacting and making plays.
Yeah, I just got to see a better game next weekend out of them. I have to see some. I have to see a bounce to. All right, Fresh. Let me go to my first loser of the weekend. Kansas State Wildcats, man. You had a huge win last weekend. Everything is in front of you. You have a shot at the Big 12. You get Adrian Martinez back from injury. And you completely just blow this game. You allow Texas to jump out to a huge lead. Texas jumps out to a 31-10 lead in the first half. And you fight and claw your way back in it, but just in the end, you lose it out there. Deuce Vaughn, I love Deuce Vaughn. I think he's one of the best running backs coming out in this year. I'm actually real excited to see where he lands when the NFL draft comes around because I really am pretty high on him. But I don't know, man. Kansas State, you were better than this. And it's kind of like, okay. We're okay with being out of the Big 12 now, Big 12 title race. So, yeah, Kansas State, my first loser.
Yeah, and I got totally shocked. I figured, oh, it's Texas. We all know what Texas is going to do. They're going to come out and clunk it up, and Martinez is going to find ways to get it done. Texas held on and won, but now we have a big matchup, the TCU Texas game this upcoming Saturday. TCU, if they basically win, they guarantee themselves a spot in the Big 12 title game. But if Texas wins, puts their chances of making that title game in a pretty good spot.
All right, Fresh, who's your first loser?
My first loser is from the Big Ten West, and that's the Illinois Fighting Illini. You got a golden path. Purdue losing gave yourself an extra buffer there, and you had Michigan State coming in, and they have not looked very competitive, coming off of a rough loss to Michigan the week before, dealing with some controversy about players fighting in the tunnel and getting those guys suspended. And the Sparty came in, and they put on, for what they've done so far this year, they put on a show physically to shut down Illinois' running attack and put points on the board. Thorne was throwing the ball, made some nice touchdown passes, and they really hit the wheel for Illinois. And it's kind of a shocker. It was like, Illinois, you've played so well, but your two losses are to Michigan State and Indiana. They're still leading the Big Ten West. Wisconsin's actually right behind them. Somehow Wisconsin that's 3-3 in the conference, and they're sitting at second in the league. You had a chance to really put your foot down. Now you got Purdue this week, and you still have Michigan in a couple weeks before you get Northwestern. So you have no room for error if you want to make it to Indianapolis in a couple weeks, because I really don't think they beat Michigan. So you can't lose to Purdue. If you lose to Purdue, you open the door up to Wisconsin taking your spot and stealing it and somehow making it into Indianapolis in the Big Ten title game. So your destiny and your chances right ahead of you, but you can't be playing like that. And maybe it's a growth spurt for them. Guys starting to get the pressure of having to, the expectations to win. But Brett Bielema needs to really just get the team refocused, because that was a clunker of an effort across the board.
Yeah, I was shocked by that, and especially with Michigan State and all the suspensions and all the shenanigans that was going on up there in Ann Arbor. Illinois, because Illinois is going to have another loss, probably good chance. I don't see them beating Michigan. I know everyone's going to want to make it up like that they got a shot at that. Like, Illinois, you've had a very nice season. Brett Bielema, I think he's got the arrow pointing up for Illinois. He definitely does. But you're not ready to compete with the big boys in the conference there. I'm looking at that loss there. So they'll pick up their third loss. So it comes down to that Wisconsin. Can Wisconsin win? Does Illinois suffer another loss? Because, this kind of leads into my next loser here, Fresh, and that's the Syracuse Orange. They didn't have Strader in this game. Sean Tucker was held to 19 yards rushing. 19 yards on only 10 carries. Carlos Del Rio Wilson, he's not the same quarterback there. And the Panthers showed why they are a decent team and played pretty well in this game, even without their leading rusher. You look at that and what Pitt's had all year long, and it was kind of crazy to think about this here that you know you know Syracuse didn't have their leading quarterback and Pitt didn't have their leading rusher in this game, and then Pitt just put the boots to Syracuse. So my first loser is the or my loser is the Syracuse Orange.
Yeah, it was two deflating losses in a row. I get the Clemson loss. There was some stuff that happened, but I think we even talked about it after that recap of that Clemson game 2 weeks ago. It's like you can't let this turn into 2 and 3 losses, and it's sort of just spiraled out of control. And now they're 6-3, and out of the top 25.
Yeah, and that Clemson game, while that was a close loss, you could say, okay, we just no one's going to fault you if you lost to Notre Dame, but you need to make it a little more respectable than 41-24 in that game. So, all right, Fresh, who else you got as a loser?
I don't know if it's really a loser, but it's kind of like the Heisman campaign came back to the pack this past week. Bryce Young didn't have the greatest game down in Death Valley, and he actually took a loss. C.J. Stroud didn't throw it; only threw one touchdown, but he ran one. So people might look at his stats if they weren't watching that football game and say, "Well, he played terrible." And so that brought the two of them, I think, cleaner back. And then Hooker didn't have a touchdown pass. So sort of the three guys I thought really truly separated themselves. And you know what? They probably get a pass this week if they can rebound next week. But it kind of looked like the three of them were really jockeying who's going to really surpass, and they've all sort of, I guess you could say, they all had their bad effort all the same week. No one really surpassed each other, so they still have room to improve. But it's kind of like you kept waiting for which one of these quarterbacks is going to show up today. The other two were kind of struggling, and they all kind of played their same bad game. So now it's really going to be a tight race of which of these three, or do we see another outlier like Blake Corum from Michigan has been running all over the place, and does he become that dark horse that takes advantage this past week, where they had chances to really add stats and add numbers, and he kind of propelled in the second half there for Michigan, been doing it all year. Or Bo Nix, who has 11 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. Does he take advantage of this and become that other guy who jumps into the race? I think the three of them, they were the spearheaded out, and this past week let them come back to the pack, and now we have a big muddy water of who that true Heisman winner is going to be, and it's going to come down to probably through championship weekend to find that decision. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as we go forward the rest of the month.
Yeah, this was a week, and you got me before I could get it out there. I was kind of thinking the same thing, and then I was going to say almost was great for Blake Corum. Blake Corum, who for the last look at this for the last 5 weeks alone, he's averaged over 5 yards a carry. He has 7 touchdowns in those 5 weeks. There, impressive job out of him. If Michigan winds up beating Ohio State in that last game of the year for championship week, don't be shocked to see him get that invite to New York. And then you also take a look at a guy like Drake May out of North Carolina. He's got 31 touchdowns on the year, 3 interceptions, and he's completing over 71% of his passes. I think it's just because North Carolina just didn't look good at the beginning of the year that we kind of just stopped talking about them. But they're eight. What are they? 8-1 or 7-1 right now? 8-1.
I want
Maybe
to say they're
8-1.
8-1. They're only lost to Notre Dame, which now is looking like an okay loss.
Yeah, and you look at what Drake May's done, and it's everyone else wants to talk about Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, and Drake May has kind of outperformed all of them.
I mean, and he's going to have chances. He's going to get NC State game where they're going to be ranked. Probably going to get a ranked Clemson team in the ACC title game to really show off. And if, you're going to have national focus and people watching those games, and that's where you have the eyes of the voters really focused in on you. You have a chance to really sway somebody left or right.
Here's his next 3 games in the regular season here, Fresh. He's got He's at Wake Forest next weekend, Georgia Tech, and then NC State. So he's got 2, I would still call marquee games. I don't necessarily know. And definitely that Wake Forest defense is susceptible to giving up some big passing days. Georgia Tech, obviously, you could put up some huge numbers. NC State's in Chapel Hill. That's a 3:30 kick Thanksgiving weekend. That's an interesting game. We definitely need to maybe circle that for that rivalry week. But yeah, it's someone like Drake May that it's hard for me to go, why are we ignoring this kid? And the same thing with Blake Corum. I don't think Blake Corum Graham, Michigan's schedule has been very weak. We can all sit there and say that Michigan's proving ground is going to be the Ohio State game. They have to show that they're ready to play because again, schedules are built many years in advance. So you can rip on a team for scheduling, but they should have known better that this year wouldn't have been. They would have had a little more tougher people to play. Corum, though, you can only play the people in front of you. And he's done that and performed very, very well. So those two guys really benefited from this weekend in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, in the past few years, you've already, like, all right, we got two guys who are true head and shoulders, above everybody else. This year, I think it was the three, but this past weekend, kind of, I think maybe threw everybody else's name right back in the hat. We're going to have a nice little wild ride the next 3 to 4 weeks to see who actually, steps up and has their Heisman moment or two.
All right, Fresh. Any other losers for the weekend?
Oklahoma State. There's a lot of Orange that struggled this past weekend, but Oklahoma State, I mean, you get shut out the week before, and yes, Spencer Sanders has been hurt and he wasn't playing, and you have your backup in there, but you go out and you just drop another clunker. Um, it that the wheels of that program have literally fallen off the wagon. And I know that's Oklahoma, and you're the Cowboys, and you're Oklahoma State, but the same setting works here. You have just fallen off the horse. All right, that's probably a better analogy. Um, Mike Gundy, you soul searching for that team because the season's starting to slip away now. Will they even be ranked in? I mean, the AP rank, as they still haven't, did the AP rank them in the top 25? I don't even notice, but I know if you lose 2 in a row like this, you've only put up 16 points in back-to-back games. They might be 24th in the college football playoff rankings because they were ranked in the 9th at the start. But that team is falling fair and fast, and it's not a good look if you had your opportunity to really take hold of the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma leaving in a couple of years, and you had a chance to release a plant as the dominant team. Not only have you given up with that, but you're even falling out of the conversation of even playing for a title.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to the Oklahoma State Cowboys. The shoe has fallen off of the horse. Like, seriously, the shoe has fallen off of that horse. And I know that your main rider and Spencer Sanders has been kind of banged up, but come on, guys. Yeah, it should be better than this. All right, Fresh. Last weekend, I asked you the question right before we recorded. Check this out. John Carroll only lost to Mount Union by 6. It was a very
Wow,
close
single
game.
digits.
Single digit loss to Mount Union. I always check the game, and it's usually a blowout. And again, you were right. You called the Baltimore's beating Heidelberg in overtime, though. They won on a 2-point conversion. So,
Yeah,
impressive
a lot of
job.
2-point wins this past week.
All right, Fresh. Before we go, real quick, if you were the college football playoff committee right now, so you're the committee, and take everything into account for this. So let's go from there. If you are the college football playoff committee, give me your top 6. Who do you got? Go 1 through 6 here. Who do you have?
I'll take Georgia's number 1. I'll put Ohio State at 2. Yeah, I think that opening win versus Notre Dame is actually looking better now. The way that Notre Dame's played the past couple of weeks is helping them out a little bit. And they still have room to improve. My number 3 team is going to be Michigan. My number 4 is TCU. This is a really tough one. Number 5, I'm going to put Tennessee. And number 6, I'm going to put Oregon. I can't put LSU higher than Tennessee because they had the head-to-head win. Like, that still is going to stick with me, and that happened on the field, and that was a thorough beatdown. It would take more, and they have 2 losses. Even if they beat Alabama at home, 2-point conversion, I can't put LSU into that top 6 period right there. And we all know it's going to shake itself out. You're going to have the 2 Big Ten teams playing, and then you're going to have the Pac-12. I think is going to be the most interesting of all as we come down the stretch here.
Yeah, so here is my top 6, and this is going to be a little bit on the controversial side. All right. Number 1 is the Georgia Bulldogs. I have them rated as the number 1 team in the country at this time. I am jumping all the way up. I'm going to jump Michigan up to number 2. I am at the point where they've just looked so impressive. They've dominated everything. You can only play the games that are in front of you. The same logic I used last year with Cincinnati. Like, everyone wanted to criticize Cincinnati. I said, what do you want them to do? Like, they only can play the games that are on the schedule, and they can win them convincingly. Michigan's looked impressive. They really have. So, and we know that we're going to get a matchup with Ohio State. I have Ohio State at number 3. I'm going to drop them down a spot myself. I got TCU at number 4. I think that we're going to shake that out. Number 5 for me is going to be the Oregon Ducks. I'm going to move them up to number 5. I think that how they've looked as well, after that complete beatdown they took in week 1, they've looked really, really good. Number 6 is where I'm going to get real controversial. This team has a 1-point loss, and it's their only loss of the year. They have two more games on their schedule that are both going to be high-ranked games. They have UCLA in 2 weeks, and they're going to have Notre Dame to end the season. And I have the Men of Troy at number 6.
You know what? I have no problem with that. I'm very intrigued by the Pac-12 because you look at this. Oregon has Washington, who's going to be ranked after beating Oregon State. Then they're going to have Utah, and that's going to be a big one for Oregon. And then they have Oregon State. Oregon State may be ranked by then. If they win out, they're in the Pac-12 title game. You got USC, the 2 teams you mentioned. If they win both of those, they're in great standing. And then UCLA also has everything right in front of them as well. And if they win through and they beat USC, they're sitting there in the Pac-12 title game. You're going to have 3 top 13 teams potentially. Maybe it's all 3 in the top 10. 2 of those playing each other for the Pac-12 title. Winner might get in. It's the Pac-12. I think is the biggest key because I could really see if Georgia wins out, they're in the playoff. If the Michigan Ohio State game is very, very close, I'm saying like 3-0, like a 3-point ball game. It's very back and forth. The voters and committee might want to put 2 Big Ten teams in. TCU, they're going to have to win out, and they're going to have to beat Texas and win the league convincingly. I think the committee put them as low on purpose. They didn't fully trust it. Yeah. And then the Pac-12 champion, I think, has a real chance to be that 4 team.
I'm having a harder time making an argument to keep one of the Pac-12 teams out.
I mean, they're playing. They're all playing very well. UCLA has scored 30 plus points in 12 straight. USC let Cal back into it, but they still have a very lethal offense. Oregon is just thumping people left and right. They're doing it statistically, and they're doing it with the eye test, which is, they're trying to get that conference back in there. I think it's about time they really come back in.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Tennessee wants to get that 4 spot, they need a lot of losses and a lot of chaos to come in the next couple of weeks. But they also have to dominate the next 3 opponents, which they should. But they're going to need some help.
I'll be interested to see what we got coming up in front of us. All right, folks, you've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you go to spinnablesports.com. Yep, that's spinnablesports.com for all your sport needs over there. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Google Pods, Amazon Pods. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't know them all. But make sure you like, subscribe, leave us that 5-star review because Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. If you're watching this on the YouTube, like, subscribe to that Spinnable Sports channel, hit that notification bell, and get notified every single time we release a new episode. Spent a really fun time interviewing Buckeye legend C. Grant the other week. Can't wait for that one to come out. So make sure you hit the notification bell to get notified when that episode drops. Want to send a special thank you to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this would be possible. So thank you to him. Make sure you're liking and following us along on Twitter. We've had a great time with that. We put out polls every single week, and we are to week 11. Interesting week here in Football Fresh, and there's only 3 more weeks left.
I just always find it amazing. We spend 7, 8 months waiting for football, and now it's week 11 of college, week 10 of the NFL, and the games are just going by way too fast. But these are also the exciting times when you get to November.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks, we'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.